I'm Jim Check with Now Media. With me, Dan Albas, Conservative candidate here, looking to get re-elected here in the riding that it's a mouthful, isn't it?
I always seem to end up with the ridings, Jim, where they have, the central Okanagan, Similkameen, Nicola was the last one. This one is Okanagan, Lake West, South Kelowna. So I pity the speaker that tries to memorize.
So you have to stand in front of the mirror and you have to do that over and over and over again. Right?
Well, I think every candidate probably has, but at the end of the day, it is a new riding and it is Okanagan centric, and I think a lot of people will like that.
So we're doing our election coverage. I did have Juliet Sicott that is running in your riding as well, the Liberal candidate.
Yes.
And apparently I'm going to get the NDP candidates in here together to talk. And then...
well, this would be the time. Candidates should be out selling their wares.
Selling their wares and also answering questions from the media. Ask questions, right? Because
Yes.
isn't that what we're supposed to do? We're supposed to hold power accountable and ask questions. And now's the time that politicians really want to listen, for sure, because it's election time. Big news today for the Conservatives, though. They dropped their plan, finally, right? The big plan came out because the Liberals dropped their plan on, was it Sunday?
I think it was, yes.
Sunday, yeah, on the weekend, anyway. They dropped their plan, and they said, where's the Conservative plan? And a couple days later, there it is, right?
Yeah.
And some people said that maybe the Liberals dropped their plan on the weekend when it wasn't as noisy, but it got a lot of noise anyway. I mean, it's not like you're going to hide something like that.
Well, look, parties, to be credible, need to show that they have, a path to tick off all the things that they've made promises on. I'm very happy that Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party have come up with a platform that shows that we're going to spend $125 billion less than Mark Carney and his Liberal Party. In fact, the main thing I've been hearing about the Liberal platform is that it actually will project to spend more than Justin Trudeau ever has. Right. So, we need to address economic growth. We need to deal with an aging demographics, particularly here in the Okanagan, but right across the country. We need to also show that we can stand on our own 2 feet, unleash our resources, and find new markets for our products, and rebuild our military. So there's a lot that are things that are out there. But, I've been hearing from seniors that they're really happy to see the Conservatives have put forward, a tax cut. So essentially, so that it allows for working seniors that they can work without paying taxes up to $34,000. That's a bonus. For those that are turning 71 and have to cash in their RRSPs, they're happy to see some flexibility to age 73. And working families, they want to see for a 2-income family, they could save up to $1,900. So, we have a very strong plan, and I'm glad Pierre Poilievre has put it out so that Canadians can now kick tires rather than kicking politicians.
Yeah, Renee Merrifield, myself, and Ian Burns are going to break down both plans tomorrow, so we're going to go into full depth on that. A couple of things that the Liberals have accused the Conservatives of is cutting dental, cutting the daycare, and none of that Pierre has said that he's not cutting any of those things.
So this is the funny thing. He actually said in the House of Commons when the Liberals brought their bill, they didn't need to produce legislation. I think they wanted to make a wedge out of this because they can essentially say, in our budget, we're going to give so much money to each province, and they can make those agreements. But we had the debate, and we just said, look, there's not flexibility here. This is specifically going to go towards a public daycare. And in the central Okanagan, what that essentially has mean is we've seen about 500 not-for-profit or private daycare spaces dry up because there isn't funding. I toured a local not-for-profit that just opened up a new development, and they had originally proposed a daycare within this development. And the province said it was interested in funding a private not-for-profit daycare that even had a little playground as part of the building. So we've seen a real focus ideologically from both the BC government and the Liberal Party as the Liberal government. And so what we've said is that we will make it so that the BC government has a more flexible framework so we can actually deliver daycare in the spots that British Columbians need. So that's something there. On the dental, look, we've been very clear on anything that seniors are accounting on, whether it be old age security, whether it be the guaranteed income supplement, whether that be the Canada Pension Plan or the new dental program. We're going to maintain those, and it's in our platform. What more is that when you actually look at our platform, unlike the Liberals, where they just simply say, trust us, we actually took it to Philip Cross, who used to work for Statistics Canada as their economy guru, and also Dr. Timothy Sargent, who was a Associate Deputy Minister in Finance. And they've said that our numbers are credible And they are going to protect those important services while unleashing our economy, with whether it be through natural resources, whether it be through more competition in different space. For example, we want to allow banks to face competition from smaller fintechs. This is something the government's been talking about for years, never has done that. And so that we're going to be allowing those things to happen, highly regulated, but we're going to allow for more economic activity, and we're going to allow for more consumer choices.
One of the big ones in the polls leading up to even Mark Carney getting the leadership of that party was pipelines. Mm-hmm. And then when Jean Chrétien, who was here actually in Level Up 2019, and actually his speech was very similar. It's a very similar speech. But in that speech, he said, we're going to build pipelines across Canada. We're going to build pipelines. And the plan that got dropped, though, there's no pipelines.
So no, in fact, Mr. Carney comes to Kelowna during the leadership, says, I will use emergency powers. 5 days later in Quebec, he says, I will never overrule a province like Quebec. And then he goes to Winnipeg and says, by the way, remember the pipelines, the No New Pipelines bill? We're going to keep all of it. And this is a bill, by the way, that has been found as unconstitutional and has angered a lot of provinces. So essentially, he's keeping all of the legislation in place. So there's no new pipelines, and he's keeping all of the same people around him. Stephen Guilbeault, the former environment minister, is his Quebec lieutenant. So let's not kid ourselves, folks. Mark Carney came to Kelowna, and he was willing to tell the people, here's one thing, goes to eastern parts like Quebec, and says something completely different in a different language. You can't do that anymore. I don't think you ever could. But with social media today, it just shows that he's willing to say anything to get a vote. And you know what? We've been very clear about our policies, and I'm happy to be accountable for it here today.
70% of Canadians wanted pipelines when they did the poll. And when Jean Chrétien said it, we're going to build pipelines, all the Liberals in the room went crazy.
Yeah.
Right. And then all of a sudden, Carney let that kind of ride. And then they started talking about, this Energy East kind of corridor, which again could allude to a pipeline, but it was clearly laid out clearly missing in the plan, the word pipeline.
Yeah. Well, let's put it this way. Mr. Carney has gone on the record multiple times saying that we need to leave our natural resources, our reserves in the ground. So he's actually led efforts to try to defund the oil sands. And look, I'll just remind everyone that the oil sands are one of the biggest developers of Canadian clean tech because it makes them more energy efficient. And that industry is always trying, this is Canada. We do everything at a higher standard. So, when I see people say, no new pipelines, no new refineries, because that's what the Liberals have effectively done. What that means is higher energy costs, more of our infrastructure is continuing. 98% of our energy exports go to the United States, and they buy at a discount. And we buy back jet fuel, for example, for YVR Airport. About 50,000 barrels a day. We actually pull from both the United States and from Alberta, and we pay through the nose in British Columbia for that last little bit to make sure that we can drive our cars every day. So that would change under a Conservative government. We need to give powerful paychecks to our families. We need to get ourselves off relying on the Americans for everything. And we need to diversify our trading relationships, and that includes energy exports. That's our largest export in this country. So if people want to show the Americans that we can stand on our own 2 feet, we need to change the way we do our pipeline infrastructure. Mark Carney has clearly said that he won't do that, especially with the same Liberals that are around him. He continues to support a cap, an energy cap on emissions for Alberta and Saskatchewan. And that just means less jobs. The Parliamentary Budget Office says that's 54,000 jobs and $21 billion hit to our economy from that one policy. So folks, if you want to see a stronger Canada where we can invest our military, we can keep our social safety net, vote Conservative.
Western Canadian Select, you alluded to it. Western Canadian Select has been selling at a discount forever, really, compared to Western Texas or West Texas Intermediate, because we're really reliant on one customer. They get to call the price. What's the plan for Conservatives to get either, a pipeline west or east or to Churchill, or when will we see some results from that? Because again, the Japanese were here begging for our LNG. The Germans were here begging for LNG, and Trudeau said there was no business case for that.
Yeah. So first of all, when you have the German chancellor come to you and say, help us get off Russian dependency on their oil and gas, when you have the Japanese come to us, their representatives say, we want to switch to Canadian liquefied natural gas, we should be saying, okay, let's look at this. And instead of dismissing it, as the Trudeau government did, and push $500 billion of investment to places like the United States or that don't have the same kind of environmental standards, we should have said right away, yes. So first of all, we would have a national energy corridor, where you have a corridor that's set aside for energy transmission, whether it be by pipeline, natural gas, or electricity, because there's lots of opportunities here in this country. And what we'll do is we'll have that all shovel ready to go. So when a company says, I'm interested, they can put forward and they can start putting shovels in the ground almost right away. Second, for projects that are proposed from that are part of that, we are going to have a one-stop shop. So literally within 6 to 12 months, they will go in one and done review. We can't have it where we're going to say it takes 20 years to get to yes in a critical mineral mine development, for example. We can't say we're going to study something for 5 to 10 years before we expand our ports, like we see happening in the Lower Mainland. So these are the things that we're going to do. We've already identified 10 projects right across the country. So in British Columbia, LNG Canada Phase 2, we're going to give that the go-ahead. For a similar project in Quebec, we're going to give the go-ahead to. Why? Is because the German people, the Japanese, they are our friends and allies. They've asked Canada to step up and to help them. We can do this while providing great paychecks for our own people. We can do this while cutting off dollars to dictators like Putin. And we can do this in a way that actually gets people off of coal. Let's bear in mind, for those people that care about the environment, if we continue to see countries like Germany, use coal, India, for example, we are going to see emissions continue to go up. And if we can just replace those India, for example, if we can replace India's use of coal for natural gas from Canada, the highest quality of the world, that's developed with BC Hydro, with hydroelectric electricity, we are going to see a drop in emissions that will actually move the dial on for those people that are concerned about climate change. So this is really one of those ones, Jim, where everyone can win, but only if we start acting in our interests. And let's be clear, the Americans, they're doing this, they're moving in on this, and they're getting more prosperous, and we are getting less. So this is a very stark choice. We can either see that activity go to places like the United States, or we can do it here in Canada and help ensure that we have the social safety net that we need and paychecks to pay for our people.
Yeah, me and Ian talk every morning. We do a 9 a.m. news show. We talk about Norway as the example. Norway has a very green kind of environment with like 95%, I think, of the cars that are being sold now are EVs. But they have a sovereign wealth fund of over $300,000 per person that is all built off oil and gas. So they'll sell that oil and gas, LNG to anybody that'll take it, so that they can build services for their people. Yes. I mean, it seems like a pretty good model. The only place in Canada that has a sovereign wealth fund is Alberta has a heritage fund. Is that something that, I know that's not in your plan, is that something that Canada should be looking to build a sovereign wealth fund as well?
Well, look, Canada is stronger when we have a strong Alberta, we have a strong BC, we have a strong Quebec, we have a strong maritime region as well. We need to have every cylinder firing, and if you actually look at the Conservative plan, which, by the way, it's 4achange.ca, so people that are watching right now, go to 4achange.ca. You can see it for yourself how those investments will be there. And it's not just focusing on oil and gas. This is on critical minerals. Like I said on a previous interview, David Eby has said that he wants to streamline both clean energy and critical mineral development so that our GDP continues to grow. We've seen a real falter in this country since then, since the Liberals took office. So these are the things I believe that we can bridge that gap, work with provinces and premiers like David Eby on things that are good for Canada, good for British Columbia, and most, of course, good for the Okanagan, which is I'm all about.
The success for the Liberal campaign is really their trump card per se. They've used Trump a lot in driving fear for people, and they say they're the only ones that are able to deal with Trump. What's the answer to that?
Well, anyone who tells you that they can deal with Trump, I think, is selling you snake oil. The guy is mercurial. He has 3 different takes, usually by 3 o'clock, and then that could change again by 5. So look, I think anyone who says that they can, that they have someone wrapped around their finger. Now, I will point out that so far in this cycle, that Mr. Trump has actually spoken positively about Mr. Carney. In fact, he's actually said it would be easier to work with the Liberals than the Conservatives. And I think that's very telling. It's the closest thing I think you're going to get to endorsement. But if we are serious about changing our relationship with the Americans, standing on our own 2 feet, we have to do it more here in Canada, and we have to diversify our trade. And that's one of the reasons why we're going to need new port infrastructure. We're going to need new roads to these critical mineral mines that we want to open in BC. We're going to need to build things like we haven't done in decades. And that's a good thing. And so that's where we need to find commonalities with every provincial premier. And that's why Pierre Poilievre has said that there are 10 specific projects, everything from the Ring of Fire, which is one of the largest gold deposits in the world, all the way over to British Columbia with LNG Canada, a huge investment there in phase 2 of LNG Canada. These are the projects that can put Canada back on top, give our people the paychecks we said, but also the options. Remember, if you're dependent on somebody, if you only have one customer, Jim, and that customer decides they suddenly don't want you anymore, you're in a pickle. So this is how we can do that. And if you look at the Liberals, we talked about pipelines earlier, we talked about natural resources. It's the same Liberal caucus. It's the same Liberal ministers that are surrounding him. And if you look at their spending patterns, it's all about more and more debt. It's not about growing the economy. And when they say that they're talking about pipelines being open to it, it's just a talking point. It's just a talking point.
A little bit of proof for how much volatility Donald Trump does. The stock market in the last week or so, 2 weeks, with the Trump tariffs, like 1,000-point swings, some we've never seen, and then he can swing that stock market, and that's not a great thing, and it's causing a lot of volatility throughout the world. So very tough. Yeah. Tough customer to control.
Could you imagine just about turning 71 where your RRSP has to be cashed into RIFs? So essentially you have to crystallize those losses that you've had right now. That's why we're talking about extending it to age 73 to give seniors that option. And look, I'm sure people would say make it to 80 years old, but we've said as a party that 73 is something we can do that's affordable, that gives people just a little bit more time. Because there's nothing worse than when you have some politician, some faraway, in this case Washington, suddenly triggering such losses. That's a difficult situation. So for those seniors that are getting close to that turning age 71, hope is on the way, and the Conservatives have the plan for you.
Yeah. This is the question I try to keep getting answers to, but I can't get many answers out of the Liberals. So I'm going to ask you this question. Mm-hmm. Mark Carney was the economic advisor to Canada for like the last 4 years.
Yes.
So advising on Canada's economy is basically advising on tax policy because Canada's a tax collector. Mm-hmm. And then part of those policies was increasing the capital gains inclusion tax. Mm-hmm. He's acting in that regard, providing advice to increase the capital gains inclusion tax, how to get more revenue for the government of Canada. But at the same time, he's acting in an executive role for Brookfield Asset Management, mm-hmm. advising them on how to dodge taxes of up to $5 billion. This is at the same time, though. So is there not a conflict of interest rule that would say, like, well, you're advising to get more taxes out of Canadian taxpayers, how to get more out of like the individual taxpayer, but at the same time advising a corporation to dodge taxes that could help Canadians pay less tax?
Yeah, so directly to your question, so Mark Carney, in order to get around our Conflict of Interest Act, the Prime Minister made him the Liberal Party's advisor. And that is different than if he held a formal position within government as what's called a public office holder. So that loophole is a big problem. And actually in our platform, forachange.ca, we actually talk about a number of things that we will do to make the system more accountable, because we don't feel that people should be shadow lobbying, as what we've seen with reports of Mark Carney doing that with the Labor government, basically pitching that they should include more heat pumps and focus on modular housing, those kinds of things, while pushing those same companies. So there are some real loopholes that need to be tightened up federally. But let's just get back to really what this is about. Mark Carney, as the chair of Brookfield Asset Management, moved his company days after Donald Trump threatened Canada and said, let's move to New York. It has and he actually wrote a letter to all the shareholders saying that the board and I are in unanimous agreement that this is the best thing for the company. So, Jim, what I want, especially as we are facing some of these threats and we don't know where everything will go with Donald Trump, I want a prime minister to go to the business community and make a case for doing it here in Canada. In fact, Pierre Poilievre in our platform has said we're going to do a bring it home tax cut so that innovators, artists, companies, large companies will say it's in our interest to keep or to move capital from other countries to Canada and to do it here again, to build things here. I don't want a prime minister that actually can give them a list of how to leave the country most efficiently. I don't want a prime minister who actually knows the ins and outs of these international tax planning strategies that have actually seen less taxes paid in Canada and places like Bermuda or the Cayman Islands. These are all things that Mark Carney has done as chair of Brookfield. And when he was asked about the ethics of it, he tried to dodge the question entirely. So look, we have the capacity to do things here in this country. We just need the leadership and the policies to change. Unfortunately, the only thing that Mr. Carney wants to change, it seems, is he wants to spend more money than Justin Trudeau. Again, $130 billion in new spending over and above what Justin Trudeau had planned just in the last budget update.
Our military, this will be my last question, unless you have something else. Our military, definitely not in great shape. We have about 55,000 in our complement. I think the full complement is supposed to be 75,000, somewhere around there. We can't recruit. People aren't signing up. The base pay is very, very low compared to what a bureaucrat gets paid, hired in Ottawa. Our jets are like 40 years old. Was it Harper ordered the F-35s? Trudeau then said we're not going to buy those, and then that's what he said in 2015. And in 2023 he says yes, we'll buy them. But then now they're talking about delaying those jets. I mean, these things have long lead times. It's not like you can just go and go to a garage sale and pick a couple of jets off the wall. Or our military, we talk about protecting our north. They talk about tanks rolling in the streets from the Americans. They forget to recognize that NATO. Most of our protection in the north is from the Americans. It's they're the ones with nuclear warships up there, nuclear submarines up there. They're the ones with F-35s up there and Raptors and stuff like that. And we have an aging fleet of CF-18s.
So one thing I'm just going to say carte blanche is, and I've spoken to members of the Canadian Armed Forces and those that are watching or have served or are currently serving, thank you for your service. I've also known that morale is at an all-time low. And one thing that members have impressed upon me is, please, Dan, talk about how to make our military procurement cycle better, but please don't get into partisan bun fights because it just lowers our morale. When they see politicians utilizing their kit, they say, get us the kit that we need. If it's the higher end, great. If it's the basic stuff, that's fine. Just please set aside your arguments, your political bun fights, and get us what we need. So first of all, that I believe in that. So one of the things Pierre Poilievre has mentioned is that we want to have our early warning detection fleet upgraded immediately. That is going to take some leadership from the Prime Minister's office. He's going to create a secretariat within the Prime Minister's office specifically on getting things like icebreakers, like these early warning detection aircraft, so that we actually get the kit that will allow us to be sovereign in the north, so we're not so dependent on the Americans. And let's be mindful that we have tremendous investments that need to go into our north in order to do that. And so far, it's Pierre Poilievre talking about the need to have a new military base, first time since the Cold War, in Nunavut. He's also talked about doubling the size of our Canadian Rangers. These are all practical things that are costed in our platform. But the one thing I'm just going to say to the viewers that are here is, I've knocked at your doors. I've heard the concern about our military, and we all need to get better on this. And so whoever ends up forming government, I hope it's my party, but I will push that government to deliver the kit so we can do the things we need to do, so we're not reliant on the Americans. And let's just bear in mind, it's the Chinese and Russians that have all the assets that are in parts of northern waters that we should be most concerned about. And that's where rubber hits the road. That's where those icebreakers are necessary. That's why that early detection system is necessary.
It's also, if we have good icebreakers, we could open up the Northern Passageway, and it could be the most economic route in the world, better than the Suez Canal and the Panama Canal. But that takes a lot of, I guess, leadership, fortitude, and determination.
Well, we're talking now about making the port in Churchill, Manitoba, into making that a new, really beefing up that port, as well as other small ports that could be very strategic. And again, we have to have the money to pay for that. How are we going to do that? We need to unleash our natural resources so that we can do all those things. And look, if we play these cards right, I believe we can better project our sovereignty. We can give the men and women the resources they need in the Canadian Armed Forces, but we also can generate better economic activity for every Canadian. And I think if the election is really the question here is this: do you want more of the same, where we see our standard of living pummeling, or do we want to see a change where we can tackle issues like the economy, where we can tackle things that are affecting people here in Kelowna, like tent cities, like our catch and release criminals justice system, and see real supports for things like drug treatments, so our people can come home drug free. If we want to see those changes, then I would suggest vote for the Conservatives. If you don't, vote NDP, vote Liberal, vote whoever you like. But if you really want to change, folks, please vote Conservative in this next election. And one last thing before we finish up, I got to say, because I've been working on interprovincial trade for a long time, particularly around beer, wine, and spirits. So I actually had a bill in 2012 that allowed free trade for personal consumption of Canadian wine. That was really important to my riding, and I got a lot of support from that, whether it be provincially and right across the country. But in this platform, Jim, I'm very proud that Pierre Poilievre has said the following: that he, within 30 days, will come up with a new Canada Free Trade Agreement that doesn't exempt things like alcohol.
Like carve-outs.
Yes, yeah. The carve-outs in 2017, there was no agreement with the provinces, so they kicked it out and said, we'll exempt it. And so for them, it's still been a problem. So he said that he's going to negotiate that within 30 days. And if you look at it, if the provinces balk at that, he will put in place a law, because it's interprovincial trade actually falls under the federal government, and shipping between provinces. He's actually said in the platform he will allow the free trade of Canadian beer, wine, and spirits, using the federal power to allow any Canadian to be able to buy from our vintners, to have true reciprocity within Canada. So I love how he's trying to work with the provinces. But if the provinces continue to stick handle or try to deep six this proposal, then he will make sure it happens so that we get free trade here within Canada for our products. I think that people right across the country will probably toast to that.
I have two questions left out of that. One question is, are the Conservatives, if they win government, are they ready to go? You're saying that's ready to go in 30 days. Do you guys have a plan, like an action plan to get going?
Yes. So the great thing is, if you read the platform at forachange.ca, you're going to see where it has a timeline for a lot of these things. And look, especially when it comes to diversifying our trade and building our economy, those are going to be top of mind. And immediately legislation is going to come forward to repeal repeal Bill C-69 and to really start.
Bill C-18, I want to throw that in there.
Oh yeah, so C-18. There's actually a commitment as well. See, this is really interesting, Jim, because I've seen your reporter Kent Mulgat ask every single candidate.
Yeah.
And to me, I'm just going to just divulge just for a second on this.
Sure.
So the government puts forward C-18, the Online News Act, and gets told by small companies, big companies, that this will change their behavior and it will be harmful to Canadians who want to access their media online. Your company, Infotel, as well, has said that they've been cut off Facebook. And that means that
that's our biggest driver of traffic.
Yeah, yeah.
I did a story with CBC The National, and media outlets across Canada have lost half their traffic.
Yeah, yeah. So this is like the Kamloops this week. Kamloops this week was a publication, community newspaper. They actually blamed Bill C-18 when they closed their doors.
Bell Media blamed it when they laid off 4,800 employees.
Yeah, yeah. So this is hurting small and it's hurting big companies alike. And it's always the journalists that lose their job and their families that have to pay for this. But the Liberals were warned, and despite the warnings at committee, we had Liberals, we had New Democrats, we had Blocs all just say no. We're voting in favor of this, and in a minority parliament, with a minority government, the Liberal was able to pass it. So I find it absolutely incredulous that when Kent Mulgat interviews every single candidate in both the Kelowna riding and the Okanagan Lake West South Kelowna riding, they all seem to say no. This is terrible. These impacts are terrible. So when there is an act that comes forward to repeal this. I would be voting in favor to repeal it, but I would tell you that I think that the Liberals and if there's any New Democrats in the next Parliament will probably double down, whip their own members to vote against repealing this and giving Canadian back the content that they want to see on their terms. So I just find it absolutely gobsmacking that the same Liberal and NDP candidates that are saying that they want to support you would really find themselves at odds with their own party's background and record on this issue.
There's a lot of tough pills for us to swallow in that, and the toughest one is when we got to ask the question of Justin Trudeau when he was here as Prime Minister if he would repeal Bill C-18, and he got onto his horse there and said that he would never bow down to the giant evil empire of Meta. Well, it turns out they did, as they needed to get their election information out there, and now the Liberal government and the Liberals are spending millions of dollars on Meta because the Privy Council said that we recognize Meta as a really important news outlet to get our information out there, but not important enough for independent media outlets to get their news out there, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
Tough to swallow. So, it's...
Jim, like at the end of the day, I respect that there are lots of good journalism happening in the Okanagan, and I think that
close to 100 outlets have failed since the introduction of Bill C-18.
Yeah,
and that's more to come. And I do thank you for your time today, and wish everybody luck, and get out there and vote. One thing for sure, just exercise your right to vote, because this is the time. And it matters not only for you, but it matters for the future of this nation. So,
yeah. Well, just on that note, I should always say this: is that first of all, there's two things that we need to bear in mind: is that the men and women in uniform that have sacrificed for this country, sometimes the ultimate sacrifice, are the ones that gave us that right to vote, and so we should get out there and vote. So that we can show that we're a country that respects our democracy and the price that has been paid for that. But also, I just want to say we have some great candidates throughout my riding, throughout all the other ridings. And even though I'm a partisan, and I believe, that my party and myself and my candidacy is the best, I just want to say thank you to those people that put their names forward. I believe that each and every one of them really believes in this country, and they really believe that they want to help it. And I think that is always worthy of applause. And the sacrifice that they've had away from their family, I know it's been a lot for mine. And for the volunteers that we have. So let's be thankful that we live in a country where we can contest elections freely, where we can have good debates, be tough on the issues, but hopefully good to the people.
All right. We do thank you for watching Now Media.
We don't just report the news, we live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent. News you can trust.